Hi there, beautiful souls, and welcome to I Care About You, the podcast where we discuss life, who we are, where we're going, and what we can do to improve our journey. I'm Juliana J, I'm your host, and this is my sweet little dog. And today, Jane and I are welcoming Kelly Booker to the pod. I'm really excited about this. Kelly has a new book out that we're going to talk about, but also we're going to talk about so many things. It's super exciting. I'm going to put her links in the description so you can order her book, which is a memoir. Pretty amazing. We're going to talk all about it. And we're going to talk about coming out later in life, kids, and how to be the parent that you want to be, and how moving through life has its challenges and how we meet those challenges can really open new doors for us that we never expected possible. So join me in welcoming this dear human, Kelly Booker, to the pod. Welcome, Kelly, to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. This is exciting.
I know. I've been looking forward to this for a couple weeks. Like you and I last spoke maybe 3 weeks ago, and I've been like, oh, I can't wait to do this. I'm so excited. So welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. This is the first time I'm sort of back online in a while. So It's kind of an exciting reintroduction. And a little nerve-wracking too, but this is, I think, the perfect place to get back into conversation.
Oh, great. Well, I'm so honored that you chose I Care About You to be that jumping off place. That's wonderful. So I have my list of questions here that I'll kind of go through. So if people see me glancing down, I'm just looking at what was my question again for the next time. But also we're just going to free flow it and see what bubbles to the surface. So my first question for you is to tell us a little bit about your life journey and what kind of brought you to where you are now and where are you now, and a little bit about the book that you're writing, just all of those things, your journey to this moment, and where are you and what are you up to?
Yeah, well, that's a big question for anyone. But I actually have had a pretty big transformation over the last several years. My life story kind of starts out, middle America. I grew up in a 2-kid household on a street with sidewalks, the whole 9 yards. And in my first iteration of my adult life as Kelly Lakin, that's my maiden name, I became a chef. And I found a lot of passion and a lot of fulfillment in taking care of people as a chef. And also I found a love for media. And I was lucky enough to kind of create a public persona for my chefdom. And, it kept things really new and really interesting all the time, which I love in work and career. And then I would come, at home, I was taking care of people. So I really was kind of had this whole career woman thing happening, and I loved it. And I'm an entrepreneur. I worked for myself always. As time went on and I had a child, things change. And I know everybody says that, but it wasn't a change for me that was like, oh, now I want to necessarily be at home or change what I do. It was more like I started looking at this little human and they looked like a mirror to me. And through learning how to be a parent to this amazing little human, I have now realized so much about myself and uncovered so much about me that in my authentic self, who I am, that I almost am like a completely different person today. There are details through the whole thing. I came out of the closet as a lesbian about 3 years ago. I was married to Leo's dad, so I was in a hetero marriage. I sold my restaurants. I kind of gave up that public cooking persona. I married a woman. So there's a lot of this little stuff that goes. But ultimately, I find myself today, my child is just turned 11. So I find myself today, 1 decade later, a completely different human being altogether. And at the same time, it's the first time I've come home to myself.
Wow, that's beautiful. Come home to yourself. There's so much to unpack there, so many different components of it. So the first thing I want to ask you is, how did you know, you touch on it with, okay, you held your baby in your arms, which I can so relate to. Everything changes in that moment, even though when you're pregnant, you're theoretically imagining oh, it'll be like this, that, and the other. But when it happens, you reevaluate everything. And then you're no longer living for yourself on some level, and that shifts so many things. But it sounds like if you came out 3 years ago, somewhere through that span of 10 years, you discovered some things about yourself you didn't know were there. And what was that like? And how did you know? And what was the process of those epiphanies or understandings about self coming to you? Like any example that you want to give?
Yeah, in hindsight is so much clearer always. But I would say, and this is why I named my book what I did. I would say less of a series of epiphanies and more of like a slow chipping away, like a slow flaking
Mm.
almost. And Leo was adopted. And so to be honest, I didn't have that preparation
Mm.
time, right? I didn't have that like sort of 9 months of nesting with that little soul inside of my body. And that was quite jarring, I think. When Leo was a baby, Leo was born Lucy. Leo was assigned female at birth, and we named her Lucy. And I held her in my arms, and I felt this gravity like I had never felt before. And when they were little, I didn't feel natural about it. It was actually like incredibly anxiety inducing, paralyzing sometimes. And the gravity of being the parent to this like tiny being that can't communicate and can't, and I think that alone started kind of an internal questioning and an inquiry for me, like what's happening here? Because it's not about like it's not about like wanting to be a parent or loving being a parent or anything like that, but it is about feeling like this doesn't feel terribly like I don't feel like I like know what to do. I don't feel like I was like wired for this. And so it started kind of this inquiry. And I think that inquiry started like that snowball coming down the hill. And honestly, Leo and I have just together, it is like every step of the way once we kind of got through this, my head game of the infant and the keeping them alive. And once I started like being able to resonate with them, that's what it is. I realized that like I got it. So every time there was something that was a little out of the ordinary, which every kid has, right? Or a little is a challenge or something. Just like the preschool teacher calls you because some two kids got in an argument. I don't know, right?
Right.
It was like I always just it was like I got it. I'm like, well, I think it was just X, Y, and Z. And it started me thinking like this kid and I have something in common that like their dad and their teacher don't have. And honestly, we just start every step of the way. I was like, I can identify with that. I know why you're struggling with that. It's because blah blah blah. And so honestly, like just thinking about like the education system in today's world, like by the time kindergarten rolled around, teachers were talking about ADHD and things like that, right?
Huh.
And I'm like, oh my gosh. That's why school was so hard, right?
Right.
Kind of each step along the way. And it was like very, very obvious and kind of cute. My husband and I would like giggle about it and how I sort of got it. And I went for a diagnosis, and for a while I went on Adderall, and, I was exploring all of this stuff, and it started to make sense. And as we went along, there was some educational testing, some dyslexia, and it just and I kept being like, oh, I understand. I think I know now why I understand it. And so then that would open a new door for me, right?
Yeah.
Well, I was growing so much, I think, that I didn't even realize it. And the one thing that Leo has never wavered from the moment they were born as an infant, they have never represented themselves as anything other than what they are. And they are adamant about the fact that they are not a boy or a girl. And they chose to change their name about a year ago from Lucy to Leo, which sounds a little more masculine, but they really are adamant about the fact that it's neither. And, I think I was someone who grew up with zero representation. I also grew up with very little hatred towards people who were different, but very little representation, right? I grew up in kind of a privileged white neighborhood. I've always had a lot of trouble with relationships. And as time went on, and I think as my child was continuing to express themselves in such a way that like they can't express themselves otherwise. They can't pretend it's like they're allergic to it. I think it started opening something up in me. Like I started somewhere feeling as if, how can I show up for this kid like all masked up?
Mm.
Right? If they are, and I'm trying to support them being like 100% themselves. I look back now and I realize I think I thought about it and struggled with these sort of gender and sexuality kind of construct and thoughts my whole life. But really, I think raising Leo and just having that like fierce mama bear thing about them expressing themselves the way that they know they are, I think just really opened it up in me. Yeah. And I mean, that part coming out was an epiphany. I fell in love with my pastor, my Methodist pastor, who also was a personal girlfriend of mine. Like, you know, in my group of mom friends, she wasn't a mom. Only one marriage was broken up. But you know, but it was like, it was, you know, I look at it now and I think, well, probably that was where it was like safe. That was safe for me to have that epiphany and everything that came from it. And so the last 3 years has been like this rapid, because, you know, things, you have to restructure a family and that has a lot of pain involved in it and a lot of grieving and all of that stuff. But it all really did. I do say it started with me really seeing my child as this mirror. And I just think the most beautiful part about that is I believe that that children choose their parents. I believe that souls choose like who will care for them on earth. And Leo's adopted. Like I just feel like it feels so special and like such a privilege that like this amazing soul has shown up, chosen me to usher them into adulthood, and like been such a gift in allowing me to see and honor and love who I am. Because if I don't love who I am, then I can't love them.
Right.
Sorry.
No.
So,
It's so
yeah.
powerful what you're saying on so many levels. I used to refer to my daughter as my guru because I do actually feel like if you open yourself up to that space, those beings can teach you so much. But our culture is reversed, you know, like we teach them and they don't know anything. But there's so many belief systems that are like the little people, the babies, they come down with all the knowledge of the world. And we're caretaking them through the experience. And so I love that so much. I understand what you're saying about adoption. I am not a parent who's adopted, but I am a child who was adopted. And I love what you said about the children pick their parents. It's so beautiful. And I wasn't adopted in a time where nobody said that. There was a lot of whispering about, well, see, she's adopted, like at the public pool and things like that. And so I grew up with kind of this guilt about it, maybe shame about it. So for you to be so open and beautiful and loving and accepting and thankful is just such an incredible gift. It's just such a gift. Thank you so much. That's something that's held in my heart for a while.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you mentioned, I want to unpack this parenting bit a little bit more, but before we get in too deep, you mentioned the name of your book, your forthcoming book, which will be out in September, not September, this summer. But what did you decide to name it and why?
So I named it In the Absence of Discomfort. It's funny because as I have unpacked my sexuality, I've also unpacked my autism. I've also unpacked the ADHD a little bit. And I've unpacked sort of the empathic qualities that all of those things bring that I have been feeling my whole life, but didn't know what to do with. Yoga has been a huge part of that, a big part. Yoga has been a big part of saving my life. I think I love it. It works whether you believe in it or not. Like if you just do it, it works. But in unpacking all of that, it all started with just like chasing some relief, right? It was never about growth at the time or success in parenting or anything. It was literally about like hanging on for dear life and desperate for some relief. And when I found a little relief, I would, chase that. And it's funny because as that happens, a little yoga led to a little breathing led to meeting a somatic coach. A somatic coach started teaching me about how I actually feel my emotions in my body, and realizing, oh my God, I don't feel things in my body the way other people do. Wow, that's weird. I have no interoception. I didn't even know what that was, right? Like all of these this is the flake, the uncovering. And it's funny because there was a moment, and we talk about it in the book a little bit, where it was like, all of a sudden, I woke up, I don't know, within the morning, but I realized that one moment that I was not uncomfortable.
Wow.
Like I was not in pain, physically in pain. And I don't think I ever knew that I had been so physically in pain.
Right.
Until I wasn't. And like, it was so clear that the work I was doing was connected to my spirit, is connected to my soul and not just my body. And from that moment on, I just feel like my entire world opened up. And I became a better parent and a better partner and all of these things because I was able to take care of myself. Like, and so I say that idea is like I think my mom said, like, well, that just doesn't sound very positive in the absence of discomfort, It's like, well, what about when you feel good? And it's like, the idea was I didn't feel good yet, but I didn't need to, right? It was like, I could see that there's something else. I don't have to feel like that. Like, so I don't know. It's just like, it was like my perspective shifted, 25 degrees.
Wow.
And just enough. And, today I'm very passionate about how we move in our bodies and the natural cycles. And I could go on forever about yoga and everything that it can do for our mind, body, and spirit. But that's really where the name of the book comes from, is that in learning how to feel in my body, I actually learned what felt yucky first. And then when I felt that it wasn't yucky for the first time, it was really lovely. And that's what kind of launched the whole,
wow,
I can do it.
Wow. I love that. I love that so much because I feel like so many of us, myself included, we've kind of touched on this before we started recording, just, you live in the space of discomfort and it's low level. So it's always there. It's not like chronic pain or something like that, but sometimes it shows up that way. But it's just this just uncomfortable in your own skin kind of thing. It can show up in your health physically and how you move through the world and what you say and don't. Like the levels of discomfort are this onion kind of situation. And to wake up and find you were able to shed a little bit of that discomfort just seems so wonderful. Can you talk a little bit about kind of touching on this mind body connection in a way, but also mind body soul connection, I feel.
Yeah.
And so can you talk a little bit about that? And was it a process of starting to live into your authentic self, or how do you feel that came about, and what is your...
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first of all, I no longer do accept living in a state of discomfort. And that doesn't mean that I expect that I will never feel discomfort again.
Right.
It just means that I don't accept that it needs to be a static thing in my life in order for like my responsibilities to be taken care of, or, that sort of thing. I've started to redefine those sorts of things. And on one hand, maybe I'm lucky that like I have found that I'm so sensitive in my body because like I feel it physically right away, and I feel like, okay, let's change things up a little bit. It's important in changing that mindset is, I think, going to be a lifetime pursuit. It's so ingrained in me, and I think in a lot of us. It's so ingrained. I can take care of myself after I take care of everybody else. Like, I shouldn't complain. I shouldn't listen to my gut. Like, somebody told me this is the right thing to do. And so there's just so many layers to that. So I am absolutely working on believing like what I know. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
your mind talk, it doesn't always tell us the truth. In fact, I would say it like rarely does, so I can tell you that I no longer like accept that as being an okay way of life. And I like struggle very hard with it in the internal speak and in actual action. And my wife, thank goodness, she can see it a lot. And so she's so great. She'll remind me and be like, I don't think that's what you should do right now. Or I think you should take 15 minutes and resource yourself first, because it doesn't sound like that's like the best way for us to move forward, So I'm really lucky there. But speaking of that, those voices that like, they tell you these things, I think that speaks really to my idea of like the connection between kind of mind, body, spirit, soul. In my view, mind and body are kind of the same. And I think we haven't in America always looked at that, because our healthcare system separates the health of the two and values the health of the two differently. But in kind of my spiritual estimation, the mind body is one thing, right? It needs to be taken care of in itself. And just similar to like, just because I'm craving sugar at a certain time of the month doesn't necessarily mean I should eat all the sugar that I can. Just because I'm thinking something doesn't mean it's always the truth and I should follow that. And so I see those things as like much more similar. And so yoga is such a practice, really. I mean, the Yoga Sutra, the first Yoga Sutra says, and now begins the practice of yoga. And if you think about it, like anytime you say that, it's true, right? Like it's always now, right? So it's always a beginning. There's always a beginner. Like it's always, always now. And then it goes on to say, and kind of chilling out, the whole point is to chill out the monkey brain, those voices that tell us things that sometimes are true, sometimes aren't, sometimes matter, all of this stuff. But that's the entire point, basically. And clearly then have not just distilled 5,000 years of history, but this is the first two Yoga Sutras, And so I think about it and I think, as I kind of live into this idea that I can take care of my body and my mind together, and they are both hold the same value. And that's one thing. They serve a purpose. My consciousness, my soul, I believe serves a different purpose, right? In yoga, we talk about the chariot. And so my consciousness is the charioteer, is the person that is guiding the chariot, right? The horses are my emotions. They give me a lot of information and they can guide me, but I cannot allow them to just go without the reins, right? The reins, that's how the charioteer has to have the reins. So I just kind of think like it's all working together. And when I learned that I could feel an emotion and it didn't like manifest that's like defined the world all of a sudden, then I was like, this is so great. I like get it so much more. I don't have to be miserable. Like I can actually just like be sad and move through it and still be me. Yeah. I never, before I started working through some of this yoga, like kind of living in this yogic way, I think I would just get stuck in that emotion. And I was so afraid to feel it that it just like pushed down.
Right. I think that's so common, so often, even with people who are in touch with their emotions. At some point, sometimes you can't even, in the moment, you don't identify. You're just so, oh no, or overwhelmed, or immediately you don't process it till later, and then you're like, well, actually, that really pissed me off, or whatever.
And it feels like, oh my gosh, that emotion is me.
Yes,
I am this. And, when I was able to start discerning, I feel this, I am different from the feeling. Like, then it's like, right. Because then you're like, an hour later, you think we move through it. Oh, well, maybe I overreacted. Or I'm not that.
Right.
So, my yoga therapist, her name is Sarah Jane Chapman. And she says she has me practice speaking to my body with pronouns. So like really practicing having a relationship with my body as if it is, and I believe it is because it's me, like a sentient being, right? So, body, what do you need? that kind of thing, rather than like, I am sick,
Mm.
right? I am weak. I am whatever. Like, no, but my stomach feels sick. What do you need? And to me, there's just, I think that returns, it's the same, it's like the parenting, it's just like that circle keeps getting closed. Like it's just taking care, right? It's just taking care. It's just checking in and really like listening. That's all I did with Leo when they were little is I listened and I went, oh my gosh, I recognize what I'm hearing.
Right, right, right. Yeah, that's such a I talk about that a lot on the podcast with your emotions and things like that, but I've never thought about it in terms of the body, which I'm going to try because that is just an incredible little nugget of wisdom. But you know how if you kind of take it outside of yourself and you sort of examine it in this, oh, I'm feeling fearful. Oh, this is fear right here. Not I am
Right.
cat or I am, a baby, but oh, this is fear. Why? Why did you show up at my doorstep? What do you need? Why is this here? Is it rational? Is it not? Whatever the question you
Totally.
ask about it. But I'd never thought of that with the body. So I'm definitely going to put that into practice. I think that's really just a little nugget of wisdom there.
And the next time you feel like a really big emotion, fear is a really good one because it
Yeah.
is so visceral. But I mean, all the emotion really is like your body doing something that makes you feel something that's like hey, I need help.
Right.
And so it's like once I realized, oh, okay, that's when I can like put a little space. Like, all right, well, yes, and I'm still here, so I can still make a little bit of a rational decision. And all of a sudden, like, oh, there's a little space there. Like there's just my whole life I've struggled with putting a little space between, my reaction and the stimulus in my reaction. And
Right.
really being able to say, like, feel it and say, what am I feeling has helped me immensely. And I do believe that that is part of sort of my autistic superpower.
Right. Right. So talk a little bit about your autistic superpowers. And, just how like neurodivergence in general is just that ability to see things so differently is both a blessing and a curse, right? Because a lot of society expects you to be a certain way. Outside of that, it's,
And I always knew that I was like a little bit wacky. I had trouble with school, even though I always tested really well. So, as a Gen Xer, going to school in the 90s, 80s and 90s, it was a lot of like very meant, but a lot of like, you're just not trying. You're so smart. You don't have an excuse. What I heard was, what the fuck is wrong with you? Excuse me, right?
right,
Um,
totally.
so there was so I think now I realize there's like a lot more educational trauma than I realized because I was growing up in a like an environment where I didn't, it's just different, right? We know so much more now than we did then. But it was I've always been the kind of person who's like, I'm gonna keep trying until I get it right. And I'll tell you, I never thought I basically got through culinary school and said, I'm never going back to school. I'm good. This is enough for my parents. Like, and I was just like, I'm just going to go be the best chef I can be, right? Because then I'll never have to go back to school. That was my solution for this. I did that. So I did that. And, like the better chef I became, the more it was like acceptable to have things like an assistant or a sous chef. And I got a lot better at my job. And, so it was like, and then it was like groups of friends had always been challenging, but through my entire career, like as this chef, like I was the charismatic one that everybody crowded around, right? I basically created myself without realizing it, like this whole neurodivergent supportive community, right? I worked in a restaurant that I owned. I never had to think about food, right? Any meeting I ever had was a lunch meeting almost every day. I ate dinner at the restaurant. I never had to think about like community. We worked so much, but we had a beautiful community. Like I loved managing. I loved hanging out with my employees. We all had great relationships. We went to each other's weddings and baby showers, It's like I figured out how to, all the adult challenges that I couldn't figure out, I figured out how to build that in. And it wasn't until, and I felt like and now I realize it was like super custom to me, but like I was really good at it. Like, I'd be like, I'm so good at this. People love hanging out with me. People love working for me. People are like, well, I mean, maybe, and maybe like I just created this such a custom thing for my little bucket for myself to live in.
Right.
So when I sold my restaurants and retired, it's like life got harder. And I'm like, how can life get harder? How? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm like, there's all this like, underlying shame. You can't like complain because now you're retired, you're in your 40s and blah, 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 and this is coinciding with Leo and kindergarten and all of that. Funny because it never really occurred to me, the autism and whatever, until I married my wife. So a few years ago, and it was like, it's things that it's hard to even like exemplify it, but things that she viewed or judged as me needing help with, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm really good at that. And so it just like be these like weird things. And then, so I'm getting a little bit off track here. Sorry.
No, I love this because I think so many people can relate to this when you leave a job or you move.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like retiring. That's a central theme because you do kind of create your little community, and then and then when you leave it, you're like,
what do you do?
Yeah, and
my wife actually. I'm so sorry about that. My wife actually at one point said, "Well, what was different? Like when you were Kelly Lycan, when you were sort of at the helm of this company, what was different that you felt like you could like keep it together, whatever?" And I'm like, I don't know. I think about that. And I really thought about it. And I looked at her and I said, I know what it is. And she said, what? And I said, I had 2 sous chefs, a right-hand woman, and a bookkeeper. Not to mention all the employees, right? But like specifically, I spent 90% of my time at work. Those people, that's what was different, right? And so it's like, okay. So for the last couple of years, for a while, I was like feeling so yucky and shameful about like, why can't I do it myself? Why can't I? Right? And now I'm really starting to look at some of this as I used to think my like nutty professorship and my wacky thing, it was a superpower when I didn't call it autism. Mm-hmm. When I was just that like weird nerd, like I that's okay with me. Like I did great. I was a really successful weird nerd. When I put the autism stamp on it, I got all, kind of ableist on myself. Mm-hmm. And so, I've really been unpacking the fact that like these things have always been my superpower. So they can always be, and they don't, not everybody always thinks they are, but at the end of the day, like I created something pretty amazing. It may not be how I choose to live today, but I did create something pretty amazing and I had a lot of fun doing it. And I don't think I could have done it without my nutty professorship and without my autism. So I'm trying to love those parts of me.
Right. I mean, yeah. I wish I embodied some of those. Like, I tend to be like, oh, stand against the wall and don't say anything, even though I guess that's funny because I have this podcast. But I think that's so brilliant to reframe it outside of what society has decided that it is. And that's true for all of us and anything that we are, is to reframe what we are. As we tend to frame who we are in terms of what people don't like, how people might judge us, what our labels are, the box we're supposed to be in. And to be able to kind of reframe that as a superpower, I think is huge for just general happiness and success, to just reframe it as like, but this is my personality, what makes me unique, beautiful, interesting, what has brought me success.
Yep.
I think that
before it had a name, mm-hmm. there was no shame surrounding it.
Right.
There was a little bit of self-deprecation because like I can't be responsible for a set of keys, for instance. And I never have been, and I just like lean into it. And it is what it is. And I make sure that there's a system in place for that. Right.
Yeah.
But there wasn't a lot of shame around it. It was more like, I was really innovative.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I spent a year or two really kind of struggling with that label and that diagnosis. And I'm starting to move into this idea that it's no different. Right. And
right.
It can be called autism and be this thing about me that I really like.
Right. Exactly. You don't have to define it as that, whatever the box is, which is something Molly and I kind of touched on when we chatted, but I would love to hear your perspective because, you know, those boxes we're put into, especially as a parent, like your child and how they are navigating boxes and just expectations that are challenging or hard, or you don't even, I remember there were so many times I felt like I, I couldn't even understand what those things were. Like it just went straight over my head that, oh, there's this thing I need to fit into. And then once I got it, I was like, I better fit right in there perfectly and also look good at it. And so speak a little bit about that.
It's funny because she wrote a song called No More Boxes, and we call it Kelly, like my song, because I just like resonate with it so much. So yes, I feel like, I mean, I think generationally, but I also just think societally, like the whole thing, we're all kind of shoved into boxes. We shove ourselves into boxes. It's kind of like nobody's fault, but we just keep conditioning each other to continue doing this stuff, right? I'll tell you, like, I didn't grow up feeling like oppressed. Like for instance, I would venture a guess that if I shoved Leo into a gender box, they would feel like their experience was that they were being oppressed, right? I didn't feel like I was being asked to be necessarily someone that I wasn't. And I wonder if it's because I didn't understand any of the boxes on like a very neurodivergent level. So I mean, from my earliest memory, I can just remember every single time I've ever thought about thought to do something, I'm like unpacking how I'm playing it out and unpacking like how it should be done, like rehearsing it in my head and things like this. So I think I put so much energy into just like figuring out how to fit into the neurotypical box that I didn't even realize that I like never even considered the societal box, right? I just was like, yep, hetero. Yep. Okay. Like
Yeah.
I literally for 20 years, my ex has, he thinks it's so funny. I like literally thought that the reason I wasn't that into sex is because I went on Prozac when I was 20 and it was before I had my first sexual experience.
Mm.
Right. Literally for 20 years. Like, no, Kelly, that's not why, you know? But it never occurred to me to even think about it. Like, I think I spent so much time just kind of trying to like be typical, neurotypical, and just like, you know, just feel like, I swear there's nothing wrong with me that like I didn't even think to consider the other parts of the boxes. And so boxes for me have been like a very big thing, I think. And in being diagnosed with autism, it has been a huge blessing to be able to see that now. You know, to be able to see that, like that frustration of not fitting in and things like that. Like that was just me working really hard at trying to figure out how to fit into the box that like maybe my sister neurotypically just was able to fit into.
Mm-hmm.
You know, things like the way we teach kids in school, right? Like, of course, we're going to teach to the 75%, not the 25%, right?
Sure.
So Molly, when she wrote that song, I mean, the first time I heard it, I heard her and Joanna play it. I was just like, I mean, floored. Like I was just wept because it just speaks so much. Like, yes, like no more boxes. I just want out of the boxes. And like, just so that I can just figure out who the hell I am.
Yeah.
Right. And breathe a little bit.
Right. Exactly. I think that's so true for so many of us. I think, well, actually, everyone's trying to fit into some box,
Totally.
really, or you're forced into it. Whenever I say, like, I don't know, do I have to be that thing? I don't. I'm just this. I'm just Juliana. I'm just that, and people don't accept it. Well, but you're this, but this, right? But that, right? And it's really hard to get out of that box, even within yourself, like you were saying. You have these biases that are so deep,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, yes, like I came out at 45 years old. I mean, I have a lot of people don't change their views very often at 45. Like I have a lot of stuff behind me conditioned and you know that I've right. And so it's just yeah, it's been like a crazy thing. But again, like looking at Leo and their gender expression, even as a toddler, and having to say to my friends and my family, like, no, they don't want to wear that, and then being like, therefore, and all of this has sort of helped me look at these boxes, identify that they are there and say, I don't live in them anymore, because if I'm living in them, I'm just going to teach Leo to live in them.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
If I'm going to lie to myself about who I am, all I'm going to do is teach Leo to do that.
Exactly. Wow. Yeah. Incredible. Well, we have just a couple minutes left. And I really want to unpack this, figuring out at 45 that maybe you didn't understand your own sexuality and what that actually is. I think there's a lot of folks out there that are also doing the same or thinking about the same or shoving it down and thinking that's not acceptable, because so many of us grew up in a time where people were more secretive, or depending upon where you lived, in some place not so bad, but I grew up in a small town, so that was very not talked about.
Yep.
I really want to unpack that, and maybe that's a whole nother podcast unto itself, but which I think would be fabulous. But in the last couple of minutes, do you have any kind of any reflections on that, or anything you could maybe tell someone who's questioning all of it that would give them some solace or help them or make them feel like they're not alone, or that, any words of wisdom for that?
Well, first of all, you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it feels like you are, but you are not. It is really lonely. I think for so many of us, there just really hasn't been any representation until very recently, and still now just so little that it's hard to, it's still so othering to be gay, right? That it's really hard if you grow up in kind of like an average middle kind of American place, household, to even have that example. I never saw two women kiss or hold hands or have a relationship or anything like that. I never even saw it. And so at 12 or whatever, when you're starting to explore the idea of kissing and those sort of things, the only option is to kiss a boy. Mm-hmm. It made me sick to the thought of it made me really scared, right? Which I know now with me saying maybe you don't want to do that, but that's what you do. And that's what you're told to do. Nobody's saying, go kiss them now, but that's what you do. So okay, you wait till you're 13 because you felt scared when you were 12. Okay, well, now you're 13. And when you actually do kiss a boy, you feel that in your stomach again. And you think, and your heart's beating really fast because you're really scared. And you think that's the butterfly. Right. So I didn't actually realize it until I felt the real butter. And they were so different, completely different. And so I guess I would say if every human on earth would give themselves just the gift of sitting alone and really giving themselves the option and the opportunity to think about it. It's once I gave myself the permission to even just think about it, that's when it just started tumbling out and it became very clear. Didn't it become easy? That's when it became hard, right? But yeah. I think the idea that we were never, especially as little girls in America, we were never encouraged to think about what we wanted. Right. So true. And not having that as one of the choices on the menu, why would you automatically randomly think about something that's not even on the menu? You don't go to the Chinese restaurant and order spaghetti. You just don't. Right. So I say, who cares? Nobody knows what you're thinking about. Next time you're on vacation or something, take a walk on the beach and just think about it. I love that. That's such a beautiful note to end on. Thank you so much, Kelly, for coming here and talking so candidly. I love it. It's just so heartwarming to meet somebody who's willing to really talk authentically about things in a way that makes you feel like, okay, this person gets it, and they get me, and okay, I'm not weird, or whatever it is that people think all the time. It's very hard to come authentically and to talk about the hard things. But I think we need that so desperately. If we had more of that, can you imagine? I 100% agree. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I love it. And I hope I see you again. I hope we do this again. Yeah, we have so much to talk about.
Yes, back anytime.
Okay, great. Thank you. If you found today's episode helpful, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Again, going on that thing of let's help out one another through our lives. It's always nice to have support. And if you want to dive deeper into self-care and personal growth, don't forget to subscribe to I Care About You so you never miss an episode. Order my book, Reasons to Live. It's on my website, which I will link in the description, for more practice on learning how to navigate dark times if you're really feeling like you're in a space like that. And until next time, remember, you are loved and your journey matters and you matter. So take good care of yourself and know that I love you and I support you and we're all in this together. You're not alone.